Now, given the failures of some coalitions at local government level, particularly in Johannesburg, Tshwane, Nelson Mandela Bay, amongst others, there is a fear that this instability might be replicated at provincial and national levels after the May 29 elections. For more on this, I'm joined by political analyst, Professor Kedibone Phago, who's on the line now. Prof, good to speak to you this afternoon. Now, you've been listening in on that conversation that my colleague Katlego Sogoto has had around Ekurhuleni and some of the challenges that have been faced. Is it a case of coalition governments failing, or is it just a general incompetence, general failure to deliver on services across the length and breadth of South Africa?
Good afternoon, Hugo, and thank you for the opportunity. I think you have it right there. The challenges of coalitions are actually many, and it looks like we haven't really found a way of putting down regulations that would strengthen the question of governance. But I think what really comes along with that is the challenges of understanding the leadership role, especially for councils, municipal councils. So in other words, when people are elected in councils, they need to understand that the role of council is the highest decision-making body in the municipal structure. And so it has a huge responsibility, a leadership responsibility to oversee the service delivery processes in the entire municipal spectrum, and also to make sure that the municipal administration is running. So when council members do not lead, demonstrate leadership responsibilities and actually the understanding of why they are there, we need to be very concerned as South Africans.
Now, that obviously raises another question, Professor, and that's around CAD deployment, or the engagement of councillors that are not suitably qualified. I mean, when you talk about basically councillors not knowing what it is that they're supposed to be doing, does it not suggest in many ways that these people are not qualified to be in those positions?
Yes, so it is something that I think South Africans need to look into, and quite urgently so. What happens is that there are interventions in place. I know SALGA has an intervention for councillor orientation, but it looks like that is not sufficient because if we see governance interventions descending into chaos, it tells you that it actually, by and large, means that political parties are invested more into their own benefits as political parties and as politicians, rather than servicing the country and the residents. So I think we need to find other ways other than just to relying on SALGA as a structure to put in some form of interventions to try and capacitate councillors. So maybe we need to set new criteria for people who are going to be in councils, because they really deal with volumes of documents to read and to engage. So perhaps that matter has yet to receive some proper attention.
Now, Prof, in the intro we talked about Johannesburg, Tshwane, Nelson Mandela Bay, amongst other areas where coalitions have failed. And obviously it's resulted in this conversation that we are hearing now around the need for laws that govern how coalition governments actually work. What will be some of those considerations in arriving at a law, particularly ahead of the May 29th elections?
Going to be a momentous time for South Africa, as you rightly say, Hugo, because we are indeed expecting that ANC would go below 50%, and that would require a coalition government. And obviously ANC is going to form a very central part of the coalition government, so they may be looking around for a coalition partner. And so I think what we need to, there was actually an event last year that was organized by the Office of the Deputy President, and that brought in a multi-party system. And it was a way to engage South Africans and the civil society and political parties to map a proper plan. But I'm not sure how far is that event or its activities. And one of the critical lessons that came out of that was that Kenya has a very strong, robust system on the office of the registrar. So it's more like a moderator's office that would look into the affairs and the debates in the political parties, and where they reach a ceiling, then you have an office of the moderator that would then come to party and assist in driving progress, because we should not be held hostage by politicians who are failing to understand the political dynamics of the country and give a political direction, but that are more invested in what is it that they can get.
So let's rewind a little bit, Professor, and do an analysis, a global analysis, if you will, of those coalitions that have worked in South Africa. What has been the difference between the ones that have worked versus those that haven't?
Look, I think generally we have really had it very difficult in South Africa to have coalitions that were working. Well, largely we had the Ekurhuleni one, under Mzwandile Masina, with the EFF. I think they had found each other. To some degree, we also had the Herman Mashaba one that was holding a bit with the EFF. But you see, we need principled kind of instruments that are going to be maintained irrespective of who is in the coalition. And I think because we are entering into that kind of a situation as South Africans, we need to invest ourselves more into the debates and the regulations on the coalition, so that it is not a guess on whether we will succeed, but it is on to what extent are we going to succeed, because we do have regulations in place. So far, what I know is that there are political parties within their own structures that are debating the models for coalitions and what should they say, but we have not had any agreement, a national agreement that will help us determine the rules of engagement in as far as the question of coalition governments, even in provincial or national government, as well as in the local government spheres.